More than half of us now live in cities. That's a huge number. And it brings up a really critical question. How can our cities keep growing without, completely wrecking the planet that keeps us all alive? Well, that's what we're digging into today. We're going to break down the blueprint for creating sustainable cities, places that are built to last for generations to come. So, let's jump right in. All right, here's our game plan. We'll start with our city's footprint. Basically, how do we even measure this stuff? Then we'll get into the challenges of growth. After that, we'll look at the solutions with building sustainable cities. And finally, we'll tackle the tough questions in The Price of Progress.
Okay, first up, our city's footprint. We're going to talk about measuring urban impact. I mean, it makes sense, right? You can't fix a problem if you don't know how big it is. Figuring out our impact is absolutely the first step. So let's start with this question. How much planet does your city actually need? Seriously, think about it. All the food, the water, the power, all the stuff we buy, where does it come from? When you start to add it all up, the amount a single city demands from the Earth is, well, it's kind of staggering.
And that brings us to this key idea called the ecological footprint. It's basically an accounting system for nature. It measures the total amount of land and resources needed to support how we live. And it's pretty simple, really. The more people in a city, the bigger its footprint gets and the more pressure we put on the environment.
So what's the goal then? It's something called urban sustainability. And look, this isn't about stopping progress or telling people they can't live in cities. Not at all. It's about being smart. It's about designing our cities in a way that we can have amazing, lively communities today without basically stealing resources from our kids and grandkids. But yeah, getting there is not so simple. When city growth just runs wild, it can create some serious cracks in the foundation. So let's take a look at 4 of the biggest challenges we're up against.
First up is something we all know, suburban sprawl. You know the drill. Land is cheaper the further you get from downtown, and we all have cars, so we just build out, and out, and out. The problem? Well, the biggest victim of all this outward expansion is farmland. We're literally paving over the land that feeds us to build more houses and roads.
Okay, next up isn't pretty, but it's super important. Piles of waste. I'm talking about sanitation. When cities grow really fast, especially in developing parts of the world, the systems for handling trash and sewage just can't keep up, and the result is garbage and waste just piling up, which can lead to huge public health nightmares.
And then there's the heat. Think about what a city is made of. It's all concrete, asphalt, dark rooftops. And what do those things do? They soak up the sun's heat all day and then just radiate it back out. It literally turns our cities into giant concrete ovens. And this chart shows that concrete oven effect perfectly. It's called the urban heat island effect. Look at that. You can see the temperature is highest right in the downtown area. Then, as you move out to the suburbs, it drops. And by the time you get to the rural areas, it's way cooler. It's just wild how much we're actually changing the weather right where we live. And of course, we have to talk about pollution, that haze of smog. All those cars, all those factories packed into one place, it creates this thick, nasty smog that hangs over the city. You see it in places like Beijing, where it's caused huge spikes in breathing problems. And it's not just the air. Industrial runoff can poison the water, too. Okay, I know that all sounds pretty bleak, but don't worry, it's not all bad news. There are some really smart people working on this, and there's a whole toolbox of solutions. So now, let's get to the good part, the blueprint for building better, more sustainable cities. One of the most important strategies is thinking bigger. It's called regional planning. Because let's be real, pollution and traffic don't just stop at the city line, right? So cities and their suburbs have to work together. Look at Amsterdam or the Twin Cities in Minnesota. They've coordinated on things like public transit and protecting their water supply by working as a whole region, not just individual towns. This next one is super cool. It's called brownfield remediation. A brownfield is just a fancy name for an old, abandoned industrial site that's probably polluted. The process is actually pretty straightforward. You find these spots, you clean up all the nasty stuff in the ground, and then you redevelop it into something new. The Beltline in Atlanta is a perfect example. They took old, contaminated land and turned it into amazing parks and trails. It's like urban recycling. So how do you actually fight sprawl? Well, the main idea is to build up, not out. And cities can do this by creating something called an urban growth boundary, or a green belt. Think of it like drawing a line around the city and saying, nope, no more building beyond this point. A city like Portland, Oregon did this, and it basically forced developers to reinvest in the city core instead of just endlessly expanding outwards. And remember how we talked about paving over farmland? Well, there are specific policies to stop that. They're called farmland protection policies. It's exactly what it sounds like. These are rules that slam the brakes on turning productive farms into suburbs. They make developers actually stop and assess the environmental damage before they're allowed to build.
Okay, but here comes the reality check. All these great ideas, they're not magic wands. Every single one of them comes with its own baggage, its own challenges and trade-offs. There are, unfortunately, no easy answers.
And this table really breaks it all down. Take regional planning. Great idea, but good luck getting all those politicians to agree. Cleaning up brownfields? It's amazing for the community, but it can be incredibly expensive. And here's the one that really stings. Those urban growth boundaries, they're awesome for stopping sprawl and protecting nature. But what happens when you can't build any more new houses on the edge of town? The price of existing houses goes way, way up.
Which brings us to the most important point of all, captured perfectly in this quote. Basically, green policies don't work if they're happening in a bubble. For any of this to be a real success, you have to mix environmental goals with social and economic ones. Because let's face it, what good is a perfectly sustainable city if nobody can actually afford to live there? That's not a success. It's a failure.
And that leaves us with the big, messy, complicated question that pretty much every city is wrestling with right now. Can a city be both sustainable and affordable? How do we build these amazing, green, future-proof places, but also make sure that regular people can still have a place to call home? Finding that balance, well, that's probably the biggest challenge we face in our cities today. Thanks for digging into this with me.